this meeting of Personnel and Animal Welfare to order. All council members are present, so we have a quorum, and we are going to begin with multiple item speakers from the public and general public comment. And so we will start with Dan Gus, to be followed by Mike Greenspan and Wayne Spindler.
3 minutes total?
Yes,
Okay.
3 minutes total, including 1 minute of public comment.
You got it, thank you. Council members, item number 4, the AQMD. Herb Wesson had voted on this one. He should have recused himself. His wife works for the AQMD, and the man who runs the AQMD used to be Mr. Wesson's boss. That vote needs to be removed and redone. Item number 7, Found Animals Foundation. It's a wonderful organization. I am grateful to be associated with them, as should the city. For item number 7 and 10, you might consider asking them about an issue I previously raised about the universality of some microchips and the non-universality of other microchips, as well as scanners. 7 is a great idea, 10 is a great idea. Found Animals is a wonderful organization. Number 8, the Animal Welfare Trust Fund. No, that money is to help animals directly, not to reimburse and cover for budgetary problems. I am strongly opposed and will write about the Animal Welfare Trust Fund being used for things like this, for travel, for lodging, for tickets, for travel. That money is donated by the public in order to directly help animals, not cover budget holes. Please reconsider that. Number 9, thank you very much. We have big problems in the conditions that you saw yesterday. Mr. Koretz was also emailed a letter from a volunteer talking about the conditions, terrible staffing. Also, along those things about animal services not getting things done, they are sending out red alerts and orange alerts and blue alerts for animals very often, as Mr. Koretz's staff knows, with no photos of the animals. Who's going to take an animal without a photo? Sometimes a no name, sometimes with stupid names, and often they have animals in the medical unit with no medical condition listed. What rescue organization, such as mine, would ever rescue an animal if you don't tell us?
Which item does that relate to?
It's an addendum to item number 9 about things not getting done, about not just the physical conditions there, but no photos on these alerts, no names, stupid names, and no medical condition being listed. Okay, council members, you know through my City Watch column that a current Garcetti commissioner has been accused of beating up his pregnant wife. The mayor's office has not responded, neither has Nuri Martinez's office. Also, the pig rescue recently, I want to thank Tammy Watson of Animal Services and Mr. Koretz's office, especially Mr. Hirsch, for getting things done. However, the rescue took 50 days rather than 7 because Brenda and the commissioners did not respond. If it wasn't for Mr. Hirsch and Mr. Koretz's office and Tammy Watson, it would never have gotten done, but the city squandered 43 days of care for no reason other than they like to get even with Dan. Finally, Mr. Fewer's office is offering me almost $9,000 for the misconduct of a deputy city attorney named Jonathan Bislick. We are actually going to be suing for more, and I'm not sure I'm going to take the $9,000. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker is Mike Greenspan.
Mike Greenspan, Orange Bowl champion Florida Gators, and I still don't see LA, but that's a different issue.
I think we're off topic.
Now, communication from the mayor about appointment to Ms. Alicia K. Hancock to the Employee Relations Board, to the victor, go the spoils. Years ago, if Wendy Gruhl had won, we'd be hiring union goons from the DWP, but that's not the case. But I just want to be certain that nobody gets embarrassed, as John Walsh used to always talk about appointees. I mean, we wouldn't want anything like $75,000 sexual harassment claims from Englander's office. Give it back, Englander, $75,000 welfare check. But anyway, as long as we don't have things like that, I've got no problem with it. Now, what a contrast. Number 2. What do I mean? Well, John Walsh used to always talk about this too, about the exemptions. Now, we know in number 1 who the person is. how would I describe number 2? Nice wed Huckabee, wed Chief Hunt. Well, we know who that is, Michael Hunt, under the Ku Klux Klan hood and robe. This person's not even wearing that. I don't know if this person's a male, female, their sexual preference, I don't care. I don't even know how much we're paying them. All I know is they're not qualified. And John Walsh used to always talk about it. I mean, get qualified people. Don't go having personnel all full of exemptions. That's just no good. Now, as far as the microchip that Mr. Gus talked about, you know, we would always hope for the best if we lose our animals, but it's better to have the bad news than no news and be waiting on a false hope. I just can't see that. And another thing about the LGBT and all that for the employees, well, it's good. Let's cover strep and bobble. And let's also, come out, Mayor Garcetti. We know you and Glenn Dake are an item getting dick by Dake all the time. So now, on general public comment, I do want to talk about something I had mentioned, and I was in error when I mentioned it because it had been heard in committee about the rescue animals. And one of the things we need to do, similar to the anti-moonshine public service announcements we'd see in the Deep South, is an anti-dog eating public announcement done in Korean and any other Asian languages, if that's what their society does, showing a dog processing facility for dog meat. You know, let's actually show these people. It's not, I mean, the Americanized people do not do it, but people from other countries, it's their culture. Let's show some commercials saying, no, it's not good. It's not something we should be doing, and it's just something that I want to mention in committee because it's something that we need to emphasize to other cultures that in their culture they do eat dogs, and it's sad. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Spindler, we did hear you barking, so that is your first and last warning.
I predict in a couple of months you're going to stop threatening me like that. Now,
You're off topic, sir.
you think you're so smart, but you're going to find out how you're not. So,
You're threatening me is also off topic. I'll warn you no more times about being off
I'm going to tell you
topic.
something right now. This is the time to listen and not talk and interrupt me.
Excuse me, he's still off topic. Please remove him after being warned 3 times
That's it? I'm
about
not
being
going to
off
be able to
topic.
speak at this fucking meeting?
You were off topic. Other than just threatening us, there were no.
Yeah, what about years of fraudulent charges on my?
You're being asked
What about,
to leave,
what about the fraud?
not leaving
What about
quietly.
the fraud?
You had your chance to talk about whatever you'd like to talk about.
Committing fraud in the sewer service department and the WW.
You missed your chance and you're now just disrupting the meeting. I would be happy to if you were on topic before.
You don't want to know nothing. Well, you know what? You will learn.
Still
because you
disrupting the meeting, yelling as he leaves,
You are personally responsible for this.
still leaving,
Doing it. Knowing it. Fact.
still disrupting the meeting as he walks down the hall outside of the meeting. We'll wait. Okay, that's undisruptive enough, so I guess we'll move on to the next speaker, listed as Dan.
No, that wasn't it.
Okay, I suspected as much. Okay. Edward Stapleton.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, council members. My name is Edward Stapleton. I work for the Department of Airports, and I'm the president of the City of LA LGBTQ Employees Association. And I'm here to thank you for getting us on agenda to have our organization recognized as a qualified minority organization. When I first started with the city, as a gay male, I looked around, being white as well. I saw that there were associations for city employees welcoming Filipino employees. There was an association of black personnel, Asian American Association, Chicano Association, but there was no association for me. And my community is particularly at risk. We oftentimes are kept in the closet. And I appreciate your efforts to reverse that situation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And that was on item number 6. Harold Fujita, also on item number 6.
Good afternoon. I'm Harold Fujita. I am the Director of Human Resources for the Department of Recreation and Parks, but I'm here today on my own time and to lend my personal support to the motion before you, as you've already said in reference to item number 6. Thank you for your support.
Thank you. And the last speaker will be Mark O'Connor, also item number 6.
Thank you very much for considering the motion on item 6. I work at Los Angeles World Airports, and I wanted to thank you for consideration of that. As a long-term employee, I actually was one of the few members of GLUE, the original gay and lesbian organization, and I'm very glad that we're now being recognized. So thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you. And on the agenda, I'd like to ask that we take item number 1 and 2 on consent. Without objection, those 2 items will be passed. Item 1, receive and file the mayor's report, and item 2, approve the re-exemption. If we could take item number 6. Is there
Item number 6. Motion Coretz Bonin relative to registration of the City of Los Angeles LGBTQ+ as a qualified minority organization pursuant to Employee Relations Resolution number 1.
And do we have someone here from the CAO that can answer questions?
Oh, I'm sorry. Dana Brown, CAO's office. I'm not sure how many questions I can answer, but I am hoping that I will get some clear instructions so that we can report back as indicated in the motion.
And possibly, if not, one of the folks that spoke previously might be able to shed some light on some of them. Can we get a summary of Employee Ordinance number 1 and what it provides for us so we can put this request into context?
Okay, so Employee Relations Resolution number 1 was adopted to encourage city employees to communicate with organizations whose purposes were to advance the social, educational, employment, promotional advancement, and welfare of minority employees. Now, there are a number of employees who are a number of employee organizations that are listed in this ordinance, and they are afforded certain provisions. One of the most important provisions is that the controller is able to deduct fees, membership fees, directly from city employees' paychecks that are a part of these organizations, and that has been one of the prevailing benefits that these associations have had, because recently the city reduced the number of organizations that are able to do that. We have very specific rules and regulations associated with being able to even apply to be somebody that we can deduct dues from right out of your paycheck. And so the list is very small, and we don't augment it very often. So I understand that that is one of the benefits that, like I said, is most popular and most prevalent with organizations that want to be a part of the Employee Relations Resolution. Unfortunately, I don't have the resolution in front of me right now, but in the report back, I'll make sure that I am exhaustive with all the information that you want to have with respect to this motion.
Okay, and also, what's the difference between a qualified minority organization and a qualified employee organization? And which would this be? I believe this would be a qualified minority organization.
I don't want to speak out of turn, but I will make sure that the report back contains that information clearly.
And when was the last time an employee organization was designated as a qualified minority organization? And perhaps you could answer both those questions and state your name once again for the record.
I'm Edward Stapleton from Department of Airports. Thank you so much, Council Member and Chair. The difference between a qualified minority organization and a qualified employee organization is that being listed as an employee organization confers no benefit to the organization. It is simply a registry that allows for a directory of officers to be published so that people can reach out to the organization proactively. Other than that, there is no benefit. The minority organization does have the benefits that were mentioned, and it's very instrumental. There are, I think, currently only 5 minority organizations. 2 of them are, one of them is Black Personnel. There's another African American organization, the Asian American Association, and I believe the other one is the Affirmative Action Association for Women. So those are the only 5 that are listed as minority organizations. There might be around 300 employee organizations that have no benefit. And currently, CLIA, the organization that I represent, is one of those 300 employee organizations that has no benefit. But as I mentioned earlier, our particular demographic is at high risk, and it's difficult for us to reach out because you can't walk into a room and see who fits in our minority, although other minorities are fairly obvious. So that benefit, as well as being able to communicate through city email, is critical for us, more so than for the other minority organizations. So that's why we're requesting that upgrade. What was your second question?
I think you covered everything that I had asked
Thank
so
you.
far, but don't leave yet. So assuming this is approved, then how do you communicate with your membership?
Then we would
Obviously, you can't go into a room and say, all right, who's in this category?
Right. We wouldn't want to. If you're part of the Association of Black Personnel, it might be obvious that you're a member or not. But it won't be if you're a member of the LGBT community necessarily. Approximately half of our community, or perhaps more, because we don't know, is closeted. So they fear discrimination if they come out. And so the very fact that we exist, that the organization exists, and that it's visible can provide a level of comfort to city employees who fall within our community but are not out. And that might actually make the difference to our community. The LGBT community is particularly vulnerable to harassment, to bullying by peers. The city administration is great, but sometimes the peers are not so great. And that can sometimes lead to suicide, disproportionately affecting our community. So the fact that the organization exists and is visible and is recognized as being on an equal par with the Association of Black Personnel, the Asian American Association, the Filipino Association, the Chicano Association, would provide a level of comfort and perhaps even save a life or two over time.
Other questions or comments, members? If not, I will ask that we approve this motion without objection. Thank you, and this item has passed.
Thank you so much, council members. Very much appreciated. And Chair.
Thank you for bringing this forward.
I can't believe we don't already have it.
All right, item number 3. Yes, and just for the record, this will come back after a report, so it isn't all the way there yet, but it presumably will get there. So thank you. Item number 3.
Okay. Item 3, Personnel Department report relative to employee development in fiscal year 2018-19.
Well, welcome.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, council members. Gracie Liu, City Engagement Officer for the Personnel Department. I'm joined today by Art Iragoan, my colleague, who helped work on the report, and we're here to answer any questions and provide you an overview if you would like.
Yeah, why don't you start with an overview of the report?
Sure. Art, would you like to start?
Yes. Good afternoon, council members. Administrative Code Section 4.312 requires that the Personnel Department maintain a comprehensive training program for all city employees. It requires that we report to council annually on the progress of training in all city departments except for proprietary departments. This report covers fiscal year 2018-19. The Personnel Department provides the bulk of its training through the online training system from Cornerstone. Nearly 70,000 training courses were completed during the fiscal year. About 10,000 of those were non-mandatory courses such as orientation, customer service, supervisory, and job-specific training. About 60,000 were mandatory courses that covered topics such as fraud, waste, and abuse awareness training, sexual harassment and abusive conduct prevention training, workplace violence prevention training, and disaster service worker training. During this reporting period, 168 in-person training sessions were registered and tracked through Cornerstone, which covers training for over 12,000 employees. 33 departments provided 2,720 training courses.
Okay. What are some of the suggested improvements for the mentorship program? And how will they be implemented into the coming year's programming?
So when we submitted a survey to city departments asking them of what trainings they have that they're offering employees, and there were, I believe, 2 departments that were providing mentorship, the mentorship program. We do work with the department training coordinators of each department, and what we plan to do is work closer with them in showing them how the mentorship program can be modified to fit their department.
So has there been a lot of participation so far?
It hasn't been as much as we would like to have, and that's something we have to work on with the department training coordinators.
Okay, and what about sexual harassment compliance? I guess it's SB 1343. How's our compliance rate been with that?
So right now, we're still collecting data from the deadline that we provided city departments at the December 31st, 2019 is when we asked city departments to complete the training. There's still departments that have a few employees that are completing the training over the next month or so. We still have time to complete the training based on the Department of Fair Employment and Housing's requirement. But at this point, we have approximately 75% of city employees who've taken the training, and that is not including in-person training, which we're still receiving information on from different departments.
So how do we get to 100% of the mandated trainings?
And we will be working with the departments more carefully to ensure that they're giving us all of the numbers on the employees that have taken the training and those that have not. And we'll make sure that those departments have those employees complete the training.
Okay, and how are we doing on employee-requested trainings? Are we creating and completing all of those?
So as part of the survey, we always ask departments if their employees are requesting any type of training, and we take that into consideration as we're looking for new types of training to put on our Cornerstone system. We also work with the department training coordinators and ask them on a regular basis at our monthly meetings to see what trainings that their employees are requesting. And if it's something that we can provide citywide, then we discuss if we have funding for it. Otherwise, the departments at times create their own training internally.
Okay. Colleagues, any Additional questions? Mr. Price?
First of all, thanks to all for the report. It is encouraging to see that more and more employees are taking advantage of the programs. Now, just curious about the tuition reimbursement program. The report suggests that there's greater participation now than has been in previous years. Any ideas, thoughts why that is, or are we doing anything differently, or just signs of the times?
I don't know the exact reason. I believe departments understand the need for their employees to be well-trained and to offer as many different types of methods of training that they can receive, and tuition reimbursement is a great way to have those employees receive training in a different way through being reimbursed for their.
I mean, it seems like it's a nice boost in the number of departments that are offering it now, as opposed to a year ago.
Yes.
When it says here that only 6 departments reported utilizing the program. So I think whatever we're doing, we're going to keep doing it to encourage more and more. So I think it would be helpful to figure out why, though.
We're happy
Yeah.
to take that back and look at that.
And as a follow-up to that, if there's a way to get all departments to participate in it, that would be something we'd ultimately want to look at.
And are we working on biggest request we get from our office is more training on specific programs like, Excel or different things like that. Are those online available?
So, thank you for bringing that up, Councilmember. We just recently piloted with LinkedIn Learning that actually does provide those types of trainings. Our hope is that within this calendar year that we'll be able to offer LinkedIn Learning to most, if not all, employees, and they will have that. In the meantime, though, if the employees would like those types of trainings, they can go through the library through lynda.com and have access to that training as well, which is LinkedIn Learning bought lynda.com, so it's essentially the same types of trainings.
And whatever we can do to make employees aware in all departments that option exists, I think is helpful.
We can definitely send that out in our monthly newsletters to let them know. I think right now, since we're working on actually a portal, an online education portal for all staff, we're trying to coordinate that within probably this fiscal year to launch that.
Great. Any other questions or comments? If not, we will note and file that report without objection. And thank you for the information and for the good work you're doing in this arena.
Thank you very much.
Item number 4.
Item 4, Personnel Department report relative to the city's compliance with AQMD Rule 2202 and related matters.
I'm Stephen Montagna. I'm the Chief of the Benefits Division with the Personnel Department, and if you'd like, I'm happy to walk you through this report.
Please.
Okay. The intent of this report really is to provide a full review of what the city's current transportation benefits are, and also to hopefully put that information into the context of some other initiatives from the mayor and the city council that really all tie back to this. This report is focused specifically on AQMD compliance and really what is the path forward to making improvements to our transportation benefits. As we note in the report, our division administers a range of benefits. All of these are really governed by the special MOU that has been created for transportation benefits, and that is under the oversight of a labor management committee that was set up to negotiate those benefits and to make changes and refinements over time. With respect to AQMD specifically, the AQMD regulates work sites with 250 employees or more. And what they're trying to do is to work with employers to reduce the average vehicle ridership, so that we're to be able to have fewer vehicles that are coming into the work sites. With our work sites, we have 12, and if we look at those, we're actually doing well. Working with AQMD, we've been able to meet or exceed AVRs for 80% of the total population that's covered within that work site. We work with them each year, even with the work sites that we're doing well. There is always an effort and always a push to try to make improvements in that number so that the metrics are constantly improving over time. In terms of the ride-sharing benefits that we offer to employees, we have two primary programs. The first is there's the incentive where employees are they can receive up to $50 per month if they're taking public transportation. They can also use pre-tax dollars to be able to purchase whatever transit media they would be using. So we have about 2,500 of our employees that are currently taking advantage of that benefit. The other major program is the van pool program that we administer, where we lease 90 vans, and we have about 675 individuals that are in the van pool program. The way that AQMD monitors how we're doing is through a survey, and the survey is done annually. And it's mandatory, and basically they're getting the information from our employees. The information is very limited, though. There's only a few questions that are posed in the survey. We really wanted to look into and to get a sense of what is driving member behavior, why they're choosing their method of transportation, what those reasons are. So in 2015, we did a commuting preferences survey, which got at some of the key information there. We actually just repeated that survey late last year, and we're putting together those results, and we'd be happy to come back to you and share that information once all of that's been put together. And we've been able to share that with the Labor Management Committee that's going to be looking at this information. In general, though, what I can say is that what's really driving most of the reason that people are driving alone is how much time it takes, what their work schedule needs are, and any kind of personal family considerations. And I think we're seeing that consistent across both of the surveys, both the 2015 and 2019. The other key finding from the AQMD survey and our survey, just so you know, is about half of our workforce is driving alone, and the other half is taking some other means of transportation to get to work. On parking, so we also administer all of the parking benefits for any lots that are owned by the city or leased, and for which spaces have been set aside for employees to park. So there are three key things to keep in mind. The number one is that we're only administering parking for those spaces that have been allocated to us for the specific purpose of employee parking. Two is the cost of that parking. All of that is codified within the special MOU. And then three, the prioritization and basically who gets parking first, all of that is also set forth within the special MOU. So what that means is that, you know, if there is not sufficient parking to accommodate all of the individuals who want to park, then those people go onto a waiting list. And the actual distribution of new permits to individuals is based on how long they've been with the city. Those who've been here longest will be the first to receive parking. In terms of sort of what the path forward is and what the strategy is for that, we recognize that the special MOU needs to be updated. And what we'd like to do, though, is take more of a novel approach to revising the MOU by first bringing in an outside transportation benefits consultant to provide us some guidance, basically to review our program and then let us know what are the best practices with other employers. To get that information first and then get to the work of actually coming up with new terms and sort of what the new provisions of the revised MOU would look like. And apart from that, there's a range of other initiatives that we're looking at. We're looking at a Metro ePass program. This would be a pilot program. That's something that that we are discussing with the Joint Labor Management Committee, and we are also working with other departments that are working on sort of the impacts of transportation demand, which is actually looking at this whole question of how people are traveling by looking at the average vehicle miles traveled versus the average number of vehicles, which is probably a more useful metric and probably something that for our program we're going to eventually evolve to. So with that as an introduction, I'm happy to take any questions.
Have we looked at, I mean, one of the problems that I've been concerned about is parking for employees. And as much as I'd obviously like to reduce the carbon impact of this, how much of that is a creation of people just turning down jobs where there's enough parking and taking another job where there is enough parking? So where we're not driving behavior, but we're actually driving potentially some of our better city employees from taking the job in the first place. Do we have a sense of which locations have the most compliance, which locations have the least compliance, what the difficulties are?
Right. So, well, on the parking question, I mean, clearly we've certainly gotten feedback from individuals that this can be a factor, and it's there's partly the question of what the parking capacity is. I think the other question is also, is there really any meaningful alternative for that person depending on where they're commuting from and where they're going in terms of like what public transportation options are available to them. So on the work sites where we have the where we have the lowest AVRs and we're not doing as well, if you look at those areas, you'll just see that there's not a lot of really great options for people to be using public transportation.
Right. Sometimes it's as long a drive to the public transportation as it would be if they just drove directly in. So it doesn't really give them an option.
Right.
So where we're in that situation, having an inadequate amount of parking doesn't help anything except helps keep people from taking jobs that we would like them to take. So how do we address that?
Well, I mean, I think the question of right-sizing what the parking capacity is to what the need is, but also balancing that against the sort of what the research appears to indicate, which is actually if you make more parking capacity available and it's relatively affordable, it will actually it will encourage people to do that rather than take the available options. So that might be alternatives. So I think that is an ongoing. This is something that the city will continue to have to look at what's the right what's the right capacity.
I mean, I don't know that we have to feel as compelled to focus on the affordability as the accessibility. I mean, there are some people that would take a job with LA if they had a way to get to work. But if transit isn't an option and parking isn't an option, then that's a job they can't take. And if they really wanted it, they might pay more for parking than other employees that are taking transit. So if there was some way to at least make it an existing option without making it so desirable that people would switch from transit that they're already taking, I don't know if we can somehow address that balance and find some additional spaces without necessarily making them less expensive.
Right. Well, from the personnel department's perspective, we're happy to administer whatever parking capacity is given us, to administer, and we're certainly happy to share and do, to work with those who would be part of this decision-making process to help provide information about what we're hearing and what we've learned through our surveys and other other outreach, what employees think and why they're making the decisions that they are.
And I think there were around 2,400 employees on a parking waiting list. What do those employees do while they're waiting for parking? And is it necessarily something we want them to change from or not? I mean, are they taking buses and rail in to work and would prefer not to, or are they parking somewhere further away and spending more money on their parking?
Right. I think there's a full range. I mean, some people are parking at private lots. Some people may be taking public transportation, but they might not like the public transportation. So it can depend on the route, what the sort of what the experience of that transportation is like for that individual. So
Have we surveyed that in any way? Because I think we might take a different approach if we found that 2,200 people are taking transit, but they'd rather not. Well, so what? We probably would find that a desirable result. If it turned out they're paying a fortune for parking and they're parking 1.5 miles away and then taking transit to work or walking to work and spending a lot of their time, and we really don't gain much by that, that would probably give us a different outlook on it.
Right. I mean, there are a lot of variables, and I think the survey does get at some of that information. So as an example, for the people who are taking public transportation, really, if you look at the number one issue that they're looking at, it's the cost of transportation, and they've made the calculation that it's actually less expensive for them to do whatever form that they're taking, to be able to get into work. Where the other thing that we've looked at within the survey is, sort of what the safety considerations are. And whether that, sort of, people's assessment of what might be involved for them in actually getting to work, what that influence is. So I think as we sort of cull through the data, we'll have more information there that will help to guide us, all of us in making these assessments of how to move forward.
Yeah, if we could ask you to bring back a report on just that narrow focus. What are people thinking that are using transit but are on the waiting list? And what their options are now, whether they're still driving in, whether they're using transit, what their objections are, whether they would still want the parking space or whether they've gotten used to transit and no longer have that need. That would be a helpful thing. So
absolutely.
Maybe if you can bring that back to us in, 60 days. Is that a reasonable amount of time?
Yes, I mean, I think our goal was, and we expect to convene the Joint Labor Management Committee to review this information from the survey, and so we'd like to share that with them, and then be able to come back to you as well. And so I think all that is doable within that window.
Other questions, colleagues? Mr. Price?
Mr. Clifford, again, thanks for the report. Question about these reimbursement figures that are cited. The $50 reimbursement for the transit reimbursement program, up to $265 for the transit spending program with a match of $50 per month. Has that been adjusted over the years, or it's been that way since we started it, or is it?
Yeah, the $50 has not changed, and I think that's probably priority number one in the next iteration of the special MOU is to increase that. Right. I should have pointed out earlier that the whole design of these benefits within the city has been that parking revenues are used to pay for transportation benefit incentives. So part of this equation and part of what is needing to be negotiated between labor and management is what that in the next iteration, what that will look like. How much will parking fees go up? How much will the reimbursement go up?
Thank you.
Other questions? If not, I have a couple more. Why are the bike to work and walk to work reimbursement participations so low? And are employees generally well aware of these programs or not?
They're probably less aware of those than the other benefits. We do have some opportunities, though, to help to publicize that. There are new bike lockers that will be opening up in City Hall, and we hope to be able to use that once it's launched to be able to to market that this is not only a way to make it more convenient to come to these buildings, but also to be able to receive the incentive, the $50 incentive.
So are those planned to be in main City Hall or City Hall East?
They're going to be in City Hall.
Okay, good. And how many shared rides have to be completed per week to get carpool benefits?
So I don't have that equation off the top of my head. It's more than 50%, but I don't have that what that exact percentage is off the top of my head.
And how many individuals constituted a carpool?
That could be two people or more.
Okay. Other questions, other comments? If not, we will note and file the Personnel Department's report without objection, and thank you for the update.
Thank you.
Item number 5.
Item 5, Personnel Department report in response to adopted budget recommendation relative to implementing the Bridge to Jobs program.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Vince Cordero with the Personnel Department. I'm excited to share our plans to implement the Bridge to Jobs program. The Bridge to Jobs program was created as a proactive response from the Personnel Department to the needs and requests of city departments to add classifications to a program similar to the Target Local Hire program. The Personnel Department is currently in the research and development phase of the Bridge to Jobs program. During this phase, the Personnel Department has met with a number of city departments, general managers, CAO labor relations, and labor representatives in order to provide an overview of the proposed program framework, gauge their interest in the program, explore classifications being considered for the program, discuss any potential concerns or barriers to the program development and implementation, and incorporate any input that they may have had into the proposed framework. The Personnel Department is also working internally to develop the framework of the program, which includes the development of new classifications, establishing eligibility requirements, creation of a short program application and selection processes, developing the employment timeline for employees hired through the program, and establishing the classifications that will be available through the program at launch, which at this time include communication info representative and inspector training. In order to ensure that applicants are prepared to successfully benefit from and complete the Bridge on the Job training period, applicants must have a certain level of mathematics and reading comprehension according to the job analyses of the Bridge classifications. Therefore, the Personnel Department is establishing a partnership with the Los Angeles Unified School District Division of Adult Career Education to provide the CASAS test as an option to those who wish to apply to the program. The CASAS test is a nationally recognized assessment of basic and academic skills for youth and adults approved by the U.S. Department of Education and the U.S. Department of Labor and utilized by federal and state government agencies countrywide. With the assistance of LAUSD DACE, the Personnel Department has developed a methodology to match scores on the CASAS test with the required level of competency for each classification of the program that a given applicant is applying for. Also, in anticipation of a larger number of applicants, personnel staff is also developing its own aptitude test for Bridge to Jobs program. So this will be one way for prospective applicants to apply for Bridge, would be through taking and passing the Personnel Department's aptitude test or the CASAS test. Additionally, applicants will be able to bypass these aptitude tests if they have a high school diploma or a recognized certificate for the particular targeted class. These tests and requirements are expected to serve as one of the methods of qualification for the program, along with the job readiness assessment and orientation from one of our partner agencies. Staff is currently finalizing new Bridge documents and informational materials. We're revising and rebranding the current LA Local Hire website to include information on Bridge and hold briefing sessions with our TLH application sites, partners, and other stakeholders to provide them with an overview of the program and field any final questions and feedback before program launch. We are currently planning to launch this program in February. I just want to take a moment to thank all the departments, elected officials, councilmen yourselves, union partners, and external partners that have contributed to the development of this program. Again, thank you, and I'm now available for any questions.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm glad to hear that this is moving forward. I have a few questions. Were any classifications deemed unsuitable for the bridge program that you looked at?
Currently, we have several other classifications that we're looking at. They haven't been deemed unsuitable. We're working either with the labor representatives, along with the CAO, or the departments. So we're currently in the exploratory phase. None have been deemed not fitting for this particular program. And just to give you a range, we're looking at classifications that have a little bit more than minimal experience, such as the TLH classes, to under a 4-year degree, which in the city includes quite a few classifications. So this opens up the door for a lot of potential classifications to be added to the bridge program in the future.
So do we think we have many people on the TLH list that should be moved to the bridge list?
Yes, we'll be reaching out to the TLH pool once this is launched to give them the opportunity to apply for this program, and we do expect that probably more than half of that pool, which is about 5,000 currently, will apply for this program. So they'll have 2 opportunities to not only compete in the TLH program, but the new Bridge to Jobs program as well.
Wow, that's actually a pretty high number. That's really interesting. Which of the classifications under consideration do you think we have the greatest need for in the future?
Both of these classifications we have a great need for. The departments were really the driving force. They have high turnover in both the inspector trainee, which is parallel to assistant inspector. This feeds into all our various inspector classifications throughout the city. And then our communication info rep, there's just high turnover in our call centers and dispatch centers. Departments recognize that there was a need there for these individuals. So we expect that over the long term, we'll have quite a few individuals hired into these 2 classifications.
And I assume those classifications will wind up as part of the bridge pilot.
That is correct. Yeah.
Other questions?
Yeah, well, yeah, this is, I think, another important tool in our toolbox as we try to create opportunities and identify those who can take advantage of them. Give us some ideas on, or some thoughts on what we're doing to make sure individuals who might be eligible for this program are informed about it. How do we get the word out? How do we recruit? How do we identify, encourage, that kind of stuff?
So we're going to be tapping into our extensive network that we've established through the Target Local Hire program, which is roughly now over 50 community-based organizations. And additionally, with our partnership with LEUSD, all their current students as well, we're going to be reaching out, as well as your council offices. We're doing recruitment events out in the community. We'll continue to promote this program wherever possible, any social media platforms where we can. And again, the recruitment events have been very viable lately, just to get out there and get our...
The workforce centers, are we working with them at all?
I'm sorry?
The workforce centers.
Oh, yes. All 16 workforce centers will be rolled into this as well.
And I assume you are going to be working with nonprofit organizations, community-based organizations.
Yes, there's about 35 or so that we'll be working with initially, but we'll share. We encourage them to share it with their extensive network as well.
Is there a way for us to get them on the list?
Yes.
Community-based organizations in my district?
Yes, we have a list on our LA Local Hire website, but we could definitely share it with this committee here.
That would be great. Do we have any sense of what we think the total number of positions will be in the pilot round?
I don't have that number off the top of my head because it's a moving target. I'll have to check in with the departments to get an updated number of what the expected vacancies are.
Do you have a sense, though? I mean, is it 50? Is it 400?
Not 400, probably less than 50, probably more like 20 starting off. But then, again, since there's such high turnover into these, it'll probably be an ongoing situation where we're constantly filling these positions.
Sounds like a lot more people will be available to fill them than will fill them. So how do we go about picking?
So it'll be set up the same way where it's a random selection process based on job preference. So those individuals, same as the TLH, will be filtered by their job preference. So if they select office, well, in this case, inspector trainee, and they're willing to work nights in the valley, then we'll randomly select them based on their tiers and refer them to the department. But you're correct, there'll probably be way more individuals in the pool in terms of opportunities, and that's why we're looking at expanding it to other classifications. Hopefully, as we get more classifications on board, there'll be more opportunities for these individuals to compete for those as well.
So if we had 2,000 people that are qualified, but 200 of them wanted to be inspectors that would do night meetings in the valley, you at least have a smaller pool to draw from that's specific.
Correct. It'll end up with a smaller pool to pull from randomly.
Great. Any other questions? If not, we will note and file Personnel Department's report on this, and thank you.
Thank you very much.
Item number 7.
Item 7, Department of Animal Services report relative to proposed microchip donation agreement with the Michelson Found Animals Foundation, Inc.
Good afternoon, Catherine Chico with the Department of Animal Services. And the Department of Animal Services is requesting authorization for the microchip donation agreement between the department and the Michelson Found Animals Foundation, and it is to accept up to 26,000 microchips, 40 scanners, and access to the donor registry. And in addition, Animal Services is also requesting authorization to enter into future one-year donation agreements. This would be our third agreement with the Michelson Foundation.
How is this compared to the microchipping contract that was done previously with Found Animals?
The last RFP with Found Animals, we were entering into the contract process with them, and they decided to pull back their proposal, and they wish to start donating the microchips to the department. So they were the selected party for the RFP, but they turned around and asked the department to start accepting the donations.
Are the scanners also donations?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And there's been an ongoing question about the universality, or I'm not phrasing the word right, but whether these can be used with various scanners or whether the microchips are more limited, whether the scanners might be more limited.
I haven't heard any complaints on the scanners being not being universal. Brenda might have some information.
Brenda Barnett, Animal Services. The scanners are universal that come from Found Animals.
And the chips as well?
Yes.
We even had that mentioned today by one of our speakers. So,
correct.
Why would they be under the impression that they weren't? Were they not universal at one point?
Well, at one point we did have some trouble with the scanners, but so far we haven't had any trouble, and Found Animals has been really gracious to repair or replace the scanners when we need them.
And I remember a few years ago there were also questions about how quickly Found Animals would be responsive in terms of microchipping and identifying the owners and contacting them and all that.
Yeah, I think it's actually a very good system. They put you into this phone system, and the phone keeps calling you and leaving messages telling you that they have found your dog. And it just aggravates the stew out of you until you call them back.
So it might leave 5 or 10 messages on your answering
At
machine.
least. I did it as a test one time and was sorry I'd done it.
Well, that's actually better than the alternative.
Exactly.
So it sounds like whatever bugs they had in the system, they have worked their way out of that.
They have very professional organization.
Yeah, well, that's exciting. I mean, I generally think well of the organization and have for years, but I think they did have some flaws in the system, which it sounds like they have now successfully worked out. Do they provide any training to the pet owners about how to access the process?
I know they've gone to each of our shelters and provided training for the staff and how to explain it to the owners. Other than written material, I can't answer anything beyond that. The new adopters do get written material about the microchip.
And I believe our staff does train. They receive our staff receives the training from the Michelson Foundation, and they in turn train the animal owners, and they go over the whole procedure.
Do they train rescue groups as well, I presume?
No, because these are only for the adopted animals and such.
Okay. Questions, comments in addition? Or comments, further comments by your team?
More about it than I do.
Karen Nipscher, LA Animal Services. Hello.
Hello.
Found animals, when someone adopts an animal, their emails are automatically in our system and they're automatically uploaded to Found Animals system. Found Animals sends them a whole slew of information on how to keep up to date, what it costs, how to do it, automatically within probably 24 to 48 hours.
Great.
So you're good today. It took 3 of us to answer your questions.
Hey, I'll take it. Other questions, comments, colleagues? If not, I'll ask that we approve the Department of Animal Services recommendations in this report without objection. And thank you very much.
We're the next one. We may as well stay up.
Item number 8. And item 7 was good news, I would say. It sounds like all the flaws have been worked out of the system, and that's really great that they even do the training for the owners themselves. Item number 8.
Item number 8, Department of Animal Services report relative to authorizing the transfer of American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals grant funds in the amount of $100,415 from the Animal Welfare Trust Fund to the Animal Sterilization Fund for the reimbursement of sterilization costs.
Catherine Chico with the Department of Animal Services. The department is requesting authorization to transfer $100,415 from the Animal Welfare Trust Fund to the Animal Sterilization Trust Fund to reimburse the Animal Sterilization Fund for the waiver of public adoption fees for cats as part of the ASPCA grant. The transfer is necessary to ensure that the general fund is not impacted. Otherwise, the general fund would have been subsidizing that portion of the fees associated with the spay and neuter costs with the cats adopted through the grant.
And do we subsidize only low-income adopters? Do we subsidize all adopters? Do we subsidize just the people that ask? How's that work?
The grant is for all cat adoptions during the term of the grant. And the grant was for a total of $200,000, but the $100,415 is the portion related to the spay and neuter costs.
So we're not changing, we're not using the Animal Welfare Trust Fund for spay neuter. We're putting the money that belongs in the spay neuter account back because it's been held in the Animal Welfare Trust Fund account.
Okay.
And that was related to the 6,639 free cat adoptions that the ASPCA grant covered.
And that's done automatically and no questions asked about income or anything else?
No, not at all.
So it's an incentive to everybody.
Yes.
Right. When someone adopts from the city, adopts an animal from us, we do take a copy of their driver's license or their state ID, and every dog, cat, or bunny that goes out of the shelter is microchipped. So we feel relatively safe in those practices.
Very good. And if an animal's spayed or neutered by the city and it's going out, do we have to provide the new owner with a voucher for the spay or neuter?
No.
So it's just a clean, simple process.
Correct.
Great. Other questions?
Yeah, what are the restrictions on transferring these funds? One of the speakers suggested that it was illegal or unauthorized, or are there any restrictions, and if so, how do we get around those?
Well, actually, we used the Animal Welfare Trust Fund. The grant came into the Animal Welfare Trust Fund, but for each adoption, and correct me if I get this wrong, a portion of that is for spay neuter. So all we were doing was giving the spay neuter account the money it was due. And I think probably sometimes members of the public don't exactly understand the way it works, but it's all, if it's Animal Welfare Trust Fund, it is not spay neuter, so we have to give the money back to the spay neuter account for the spay neuters that were done.
Thank you.
Thank you. So if there are no objections, we will adopt the Animal Services Department report recommendations without objection.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 9.
Item 9, motion Koretz Blumenfield relative to conditions in all of the city's animal shelters during the 2019 rainy season.
Brenda Barnett, still with Animal Services. You want to introduce yourself again?
Karen Dictorelli, Animal Services.
So we took this report, took this request for a report, and very seriously and carefully went through all 6 of our animal care service centers, although there was a focus on South LA. So the report provides the department's responses to the allegations of 2 former volunteers at South Los Angeles Chesterfield Square Services Center who distributed a form email listing concerns regarding unsuitable conditions at the shelter. It also will address the concerns expressed by one former volunteer from the West Los Angeles Service Center. So at this point, let's just sort of generalize on all the shelters. Every shelter has a medical team consisting of a veterinarian and a registered veterinary technician and veterinary technicians. In addition, private veterinary clinics are contracted for services during after hours and in-house when in-house medical staff is not on shift. We're extremely fortunate here in LA City, as some of my colleagues in Northern California don't even have veterinary services for their shelters at all. So for us to have a veterinarian per shelter, it's the right thing to do, and we're lucky that we're able to do that. Our animals are all fed a balanced diet based on their needs. They're fed twice a day. Some are fed 3 times a day if it's indicated because of age or their medical condition. They have water at all times. They're treated humanely. They're not all walked daily. We have implemented play groups and in-kennel enrichment programs for them so that they get some kind of enrichment throughout their stay in the kennel. Inhumane treatment of a shelter guest would be a cause for termination. There was some question about the beds in the shelters. Our staff, in all honesty, I stopped this proposal so we could see what happens. The staff did request permission to ask the Board of Animal Services Commissioners for funding from the Animal Welfare Trust Fund to purchase some additional Kuranda beds. I delayed this request because we have a grant submitted to buy more beds, and I'd like to find out if we're going to get the grant before we buy the beds. We do from time to time do bed drives in the shelter. Sometimes volunteers do them for us. It's also posted on the web that you can donate a Kuranda bed, which is a particularly good bed for shelters, and we get those sort of, since the holidays were over, I think I've gotten 2 or 3 emails notifying us that we had more beds on the way. So right now, at this point in time, we have 737 runs, and 160 of them do not have beds. Now, not all dogs can be given beds because they chew them up and they ingest them, and that's going to create a surgical problem. So we do give them bedding on the ground. Many of our kennels are heated with infra, sort of that radiant heat. So I really think we're doing a good job. But we will get those extra 160 beds either through a donation or by asking the commission to approve the funding. Specifically, Chesterfield Square has 218 large dog runs, 214 are equipped with beds. So there's only 4 without beds there. On Thursday, December the 5th, after seeing the emails and the concern expressed on social media posts about allegations and conditions at Chesterfield Square, some members of the mayor's team went to South LA, did an unannounced visit, and they found that the dogs did have beds and the kennels were clean. Harbor Shelter at this time, we don't have any facility complaints. East Valley, no facility complaints. West Los Angeles, we did have the complaint from the one former volunteer. The caulking that kept water from leaking in around some of the compartments for the dogs, was redone in February to keep the kennels dry. GSD came out and inspected it again in December and concluded that there were no leaks, and it wasn't going to be a problem during the rain. All the caulking was intact. The awnings on each of the cubbies were in working order. They also looked at the heating system. All heaters are working, and staff is actually directed that if, during the rainy season, if the blankets get wet, take them out and give them fresh blankets. And the supervisors do walk rounds and look for these kind of things at each of the shelters. That pretty much concludes the report. I will tell you, just for the kind of stress our staff is under, that for the calendar year 2019, our adult cat intake was up 19%. Our kitten intake was up, was up, I was doing month to month, was up 13% for adult cats. It was up for the whole year 20% for kittens. And that's over an increase from the previous year that was about 15%. So we were up 15% last year and another 20% over that this year. Our dog population was actually down by 5%. So that's, we couldn't do everything we do without volunteers. Fortunately, and we're grateful that the city did invest in letting us have a volunteer coordinator. And since she has been here, this year alone, the number of volunteers who worked is up 29%. The number of volunteer hours worked is up 40%. And, they've done 3% more volunteer orientations and 64% more people attended. In addition to that, our adult cat fosters was down 13%, but our kitten fosters was up 30%. Our dog fosters was up 25%. And so our total fosters was up 26%. So this is all because we have a volunteer coordinator, that we're getting a lot of these animals out of the shelter and into homes where they get that kind of home care. We learn more about them, and it makes them more adoptable. So we have a total of 2,800 active volunteers, and we're grateful for them.
Okay, I have a few questions. The heavy rains in general, are all the dog runs protected, or do many of them still get wet?
They have cubbies that they can go in and out of, and the cubbies are where the radiant heating is and where the raised beds are. So if they want to get out of the elements, they can go in the kennels. They also have awnings that are over most of the kennels. Some do not have the awnings.
So the runs will get wet, but the places where the dogs can get out of the rain stay dry, presumably. Yes. And you said the ones that were problematic were being caulked.
Yeah, the ones at West LA before that had been caulked, the caulking was holding. There was no problem with it, actually.
So is there any advantage to fully covering the dog runs?
Some of them are.
Right.
Aren't they?
We had talked about that before, but we also thought it was a disadvantage because, dogs survive, and per our veterinarian, medically, it's better for them to be able to have access to the sun and to the heat. And
right, and I was thinking that too, that most of the year they would probably want the access to the sun and have, I guess, better mental health, etc.
Yeah, and I don't know, I remember a conversation a few years ago about covering so much of the property that the rain wouldn't be able to seep into the ground. So I think there are some environmental concerns it makes the footprint of our building bigger if we cover every run.
Okay, that makes sense. I assume the increase in kittens we would probably attribute to our inability to have a TNR program and to either provide advice to folks about removing kittens from underneath their buildings where they're probably being taken care of by the mama cats, and spotting them when the mother cat is left to forage for food.
Correct.
So hopefully we get past that point and can address the one weak spot in our adoption system. As far as alerts, it was mentioned that we might not provide enough photographic information or medical information about some of our animals that are on alert and possibly close to being euthanized for space or for medical condition. Would you say that that's true? And if so, is there a way for us to do a better job of doing that?
No, I think that particular comment had to do with a glitch in the system. You might know more about that glitch than I do, but there was a period of time.
Yes, now that we have the intake forms that we have every person that brings in an animal fill out, we were uploading them to the system under photographs, and we were clicking the box that said photograph only, and so that was excluding our pictures from being uploaded to any other site. So it was putting up a posted sign that said this picture is not available, but the picture was, because we would go into our system and we would see the pictures there. So we called IT, and IT figured out there was a glitch in the system. So they've been working on it, and they finally figured it out, and they have to unclick when they use the forms, but click when they use the pictures. So our staff has all been informed of that, and it should be solved.
I think it was less than a week's worth It was less than a week's worth of confusion.
So you think that's fully implemented
Yes.
and corrected? What about the descriptions of medical conditions?
Well, we have some people at each shelter who send out, I mean, I get some of the alerts, just sort of a test, and the ones that I get have copies of the x-rays, they have the whole medical history, a little bit about the dog's personality, if it's a mobile dog, whether or not it's been introduced to other dogs. I mean, there's a lot of information on the ones that I get. I get all the ones from East Valley.
So if we can check to make sure that all the different shelters are using that same process, that would be good. Since it has gotten mentioned, I would assume that it's generated from somewhere. So it could be a past problem. It could be an existing problem at one shelter. So if we could just double check on that.
Yeah, we can let Annette know, and she can let everybody know when she gets back.
And you mentioned the reasons why we don't have the beds yet, because we're waiting for grants. I noticed some shelters seem to have a significantly appropriate number, and some have virtually none. Is there a reason why the discrepancy?
People just do drives for the shelters that they volunteer at usually, but just because the animal doesn't have a bed doesn't mean it doesn't have a thick blanket or bedding to lay on. But it just means that we don't have those the Kuranda beds sit up off the floor. And when we first opened some of the shelters, all the Kuranda beds didn't fit in every cubby, so we sort of have to work on getting the right size. But they're great beds. We want them for everyone. I just didn't want to double buy. I didn't want to have us buy them out of the Animal Welfare Trust Fund and then have someone give us a grant to pay for all of them.
Right, and I remember years ago, whether it was a claim or real, that it was claimed at one shelter that the person that ran the shelter actually threw out all the beds. Did that actually happen?
Not that I'm aware of.
I don't remember anything like
Probably would have
that.
been like 5 years ago.
They throw them away when they get broken up, and I think that may have been the case. I mean, you can take those Kuranda beds and you can rebuild them. I've done them for my own dogs, but when you buy the parts as separate from the whole frame, I think it's actually more economical just to buy the whole thing over again.
And you're not talking about just the kinds of beds that people have in their homes where there's nothing underneath. It's just the fabric and...
That's what it is. It's up on legs, and it has a waterproof fabric that stretches. So there's a little bit of give and flexibility for the comfort of the animal, but it is up off the ground.
And those are the only kinds we use in the shelters?
We have in the past used those. I think they were called Perlas.
We have a different brand that the Boy Scouts in West Valley built for us and donated, I believe it was 25 on the list. They're raised beds as well, and they look like the Carandas, but it was a different brand, and they just donated those to West Valley just a while ago.
So they're all raised beds
Yes.
of
They're
one
all right.
form.
We
or
did at
another.
one time have plastic ones that were sort of looked more like a traditional dog bed, and you put blankets in them, but they were made out of a rubberized material, and I think the dogs ate those quickly.
So it's too tempting for them. Can one donate used beds, or these are only new that you would accept
If it's
as
in good,
donation?
I mean, we accept all kinds of donations, but then we look at them and sort of see if they're safe. If they're going to be safe and usable and they can be cleaned and disinfected, we would use them.
But if they're easily chewed up, they're not what you're looking for.
No, that might mean our veterinarian spent more time in surgery and not for spay neuters.
And if dogs aren't walked daily, why aren't they walked?
Because we don't have enough staff and we don't have enough volunteers. We've done a lot of different things. It's interesting. We had a good friend of the department, Robert Cabral, was doing dog training classes for how to do play groups, and he was going around to all the shelters. He'd been around a couple times, I think, hadn't he, to all the shelters. And, people were frustrated, and they're like, well, we don't have enough staff, and the volunteers aren't really getting the training and the confidence that they need to be able to do the play groups. So we brought in Dogs Playing for Life a couple of times, and we thought there'd be a lot of hype and a lot of excitement, and they would attract a lot more volunteers. It really hasn't been the case. I think we have given our staff increased skills, and we have a few volunteers who help more with the play groups, but I don't really see the volunteers managing the play groups, and I think that's really the issue. And then we started doing a program called Boredom Busters, and it's moving. I don't know if it's made it to all the shelters, has it? So it started at South Chesterfield Square, and it's where, and I don't know the whole program, Karen can probably tell you more, but the dogs get to have different scents, different tastes, different things to sort of just get their attention and if you will, give them something to think about while they're, being kenneled.
Kongs with peanut butter, so it keeps them entertained, things like that, things to chew on that are safe for them, ball to some, but they're supposed to be a toy or an enrichment in every single kennel every single day.
So in a perfect world, we would take them all out, the ones that are safe to handle. We would take them all out either for a private walk or for a play group, but we're not, we just don't have the people power to do that and do everything else.
So it's all largely volunteer driven.
A lot of the dog walking is volunteer driven. I'd say the play groups are staff driven.
So if people want to come and just walk dogs, can a volunteer do that?
Yeah, we go to a volunteer orientation, pick your shelter, and we'll get you trained. And depending on your natural dog skills, we may give you smaller dogs to start with and then move you up to larger dogs, or we'll try to match you with the right kind of dog for you.
Very good. Mr. Price, anything to add? All right, we will therefore note and file the Animal Services report without objection.
Thank you.
Item number 10.
Item 10, Bureau of Sanitation report relative to a policy that provides for microchip scanning and notification of the registered owner when picking up a dead animal.
Good afternoon, Councilman. Daniel McKay, Bureau of Sanitation, Division Manager. I was here before, Mr. Kretz, about policy agreement we have with Animal Services in relationship to checking the chips with our scanners. When we identify a chip that comes up as a read, we notify Animal Services, and they go in part, put it into a database, and they do all the information as far as contacting the resident or the owner of the animal and letting them know we've retrieved the animal. Now, they don't have access to retrieve the animal themselves because that would be unsafe and unsanitary, but they do have the option of coming to get their belongings, if it's a tag or a collar. And so that's the agreement we came up with in short and summary. But we will have a large database, a shared Google Doc file to keep on record in case anyone ever calls and says, hey, has my animal been found? We will be able to notify them. But they have their own notification process. We're not really a part of that. But that's what we've agreed to do when we get a hit on a chip reader.
So do we get requests to have the animal back so they can appropriately cremate them or whatever?
I'm not
Karen
sure.
from LA Animal Services. Yes, sir, we do. A private crematorium would have to come and pick up the animal. Legally, they can't pick it up themselves, or a licensed veterinarian. But we do get a lot of requests for that, and we used to have no private crematoriums in the city, and now we have 3 for animals.
And so we do allow that. So if my dog got away and got run over and I found out about it, I'd be able to have someone do that if I wanted.
Yes, what we agreed to is if they found an animal with a chip and we could identify it, they would leave the animal at the shelter for 48 hours to give the owner a chance to try and come and get the animal. And then after 48, sanitation would take that animal back. Excuse the expression, but we separate it from the other animals. We put a tag on it so we know why it's there in our freezer.
And I presume some people are doing this and it's a system that works.
Yes.
Do we know how often pet owners get contacted through this process? Any sense of how many people have been contacted, say, in the last year?
We just started the Google Doc with Department of Sanitation, so we would only know for the last 30 days. We can report back on that if you would like. I did look at it just a few minutes before this started, and I saw that even at East Valley alone, they've already brought 4 animals to us that the supervisor has identified to the owner. And that was just at one facility.
Well, it sounds like a reasonably comprehensive number considering. Okay, Mr. Price, any further questions?
Nope.
Very good. Well, thank you.
I'm
And
sorry, just one other question. How much does it cost for the scanning? How much does it cost for it's registered?
To register with found animals, I am not sure. For our department, we charge $15 for owners to come in and get their animal microchipped. That's our fee. I'm not sure what the cost is when when they adopt an animal from us. It's obviously free.
Yeah.
But I believe there's a cost if you change your address or if you move or relocate or anything like that. And that's through found animals themselves.
And I assume we don't charge for someone to collect their dead animal.
No.
Very good. Well, thank you, and thank you for the report.
Thank
And we will note and file a report without objection. And I believe we have no further business before us.
Clears the desk.
Therefore, we are adjourned.